Good morning, friends. Today is Tuesday, June 16th, and we are going to read a book today about the Stonewall riots. And the Stonewall riots happened in June 1969, and that is why we celebrate Pride Month in June, which celebrates the rights of our LGBTQ community, which is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer community. And so we're going to learn a little bit today about people who stood up for what they believed in at that time in 1969. And this book is called Stonewall, A Building, an Uprising, a Revolution, written by Rob Sanders and illustrated by Jamie Christoph. Two stable houses side by side. For more than 100 years, we witnessed history. Then came a night when we became part of history. We were built in the 1840s to board the horses of the affluent in New York City's Greenwich Village. Inside our brick walls, horses whinnied and hammers changed. Outside, passers-by bustled as carriages rumbled on the cobblestone streets. As time passed, the wealthy residents began to move uptown, taking with them their art clubs, libraries, fine hotels, and theaters. Our neighborhood became a mecca for immigrants arriving from all around the world. Visitors made their way to Greenwich Village. Many of them stayed. Greenwich Village was changing. We changed too. The smell of freshly baked bread began to waft out our windows and into the neighborhood. The roar of automobiles replaced the rumble of carriages as artists and writers moved in. Contemporary art galleries, experimental theaters, and small restaurants sprang up around us. The village was becoming the creative center of New York City. By 1930, our two buildings were joined together and we became Bonnie's Stonewall Restaurant. Celebrities, artisans, tourists, and local residents lunched at our tables, shoulder to shoulder. That's the Stonewall there. Greenwich Village was a place where you could be yourself and where being different was welcomed and accepted. Newness thumped in the heart of Greenwich Village. In the 1950s, vibrating our windows. Musicians played on the streets. Jazz filled the air. Poets performed in restaurants. Artists painted in their studios. The beat movement arrived, and we witnessed it all. Leading up to the 1960s, our neighborhood welcomed gays and lesbians, men who loved men and women who loved women. We were a home for people who were told they didn't fit in or belong. We had welcomed all kinds of people before, so we knew what to do. In 1967, we swung open our doors and became the Stonewall Inn. Gay men and women from throughout the city and country came to meet old and new friends, free to be themselves inside our walls. Women and men, young and old, teenagers, transgender people, drag queens, veterans, business people, students, people of different colors, religions, and cultures gathered, chatted, laughed, and danced under our roof. Others were not as accepting. They thought those who gathered within our walls were too different. We heard the whispered voices of those inside. We heard the whispered voices of those inside saying, loving someone like yourself was illegal. Socializing together could get you arrested. Wearing the wrong clothes could land you in jail. Being gay could get you fired or kicked out of your home. Some nights we heard fists pounding on our doors, felt angry footsteps stomping on our floor, and saw flashes of glaring lights as the police arrested some of those inside. After each raid, those who hadn't been arrested left quietly, angrily, disappearing into the darkness. We stood tall and kept opening our doors. People kept coming. But the police raids kept coming too. We couldn't stop them. In the steaming early morning hours of June 28th, 1969, under a nearly full moon, another raid began. "Police!" a voice shouted. "We're taking the place." Officers stormed through our doors, lining up the people inside, demanding IDs, detaining some, arresting others. This time, those not arrested didn't disappear into the night. Instead, they stood defiantly in the street and on the sidewalk under our rusty sign. This time, they weren't quiet. As the ones arrested were led to police cars and patrol wagons, the anger of the growing crowd was lit. "Why don't you do something?" yelled one woman as she was forced into a police car. This is when people are going to start using their voices and protesting, right? Like we've been talking about. Immediately, the spark of anger grew into a smoldering resistance. Shouts and screams echoed off bricks, fists thrust in the air. We saw the faces of the crowd and felt their rage. The Stonewall uprising had begun. The police, shocked by the defiance of the crowd, rushed back in and barricaded themselves inside. So they blocked themselves inside the Stonewall. Our friends stood outside, trying to force open our doors. Our windows were shattered. Smoke drifted through our rooms. We stood firm. Years of silent anger inflamed the crowd. The police called for help, and it soon arrived. The fires were extinguished. The police came back outside. But the crowd's anger was not extinguished. "Gay power," the protesters shouted. "We want freedom." The police had never seen anything like it before. Neither had we. And it wasn't over. The Stonewall uprising continued on and off for several days and nights. A new day was dawning for the gay rights movement. The change had begun here inside our walls at the Stonewall Inn, now known as the LGBTQ+ rights movement. On June 28, 1970, our windows looked out on men and women gathering to celebrate the first annual anniversary of the Stonewall uprising. At first, hundreds marched. Then thousands of women and men, young and old, teenagers, transgender people, drag queens, veterans, business people, students, people of all different colors, religions, and cultures, and their friends and families joined to parade through the streets of New York City. "Say it clear, say it loud, gay is good, gay is proud," they chanted. So that's the first gay pride march in New York City, marching the first anniversary of the Stonewall riots. Many things are different now. Some things have changed. Now, two men who love each other or two women who love each other can marry. We know. We've seen their happy faces snapping photos outside our door. We've heard their footsteps walking side by side along our floors. We've felt their love. Each year in June, people all over the world celebrate the movement for LGBTQ rights, a movement that has come so far, a movement that still has further to go. They celebrate inside and outside our walls. They celebrate freedom. They celebrate equality. It all began one night here at the Stonewall Inn when two old horse stables became part of history. That is the end, and this is a picture now, not a cartoon, just a picture of the Stonewall Inn. So this was another example, right, where people were being treated unfairly, this time based on who they loved, and they stood up for what they believed in, which was that people who are gay, lesbian, transgender, queer, bisexual should have the same rights as everyone else, and they protested in the streets, and they use their voices to create change. And now, like the book said, 2 men can be married, 2 women can be married, and we've seen some change by people using their voices to create a new life for themselves. And we just want to keep doing that and keep focusing on people who have changed our world. So tomorrow we're going to read another book. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye, friends.